Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to be continuing on with our Super Heavy challenge and the Space Marine Fellblade. And finally we're at a part that isn't just the armour, it's time for the tracks. What I feel is one of the most important parts when painting a vehicle like this. I liken it to the basing for your normal minis. It's a chance to really enhance and complement and set the scene for this model. And there are so many different ways of doing tracks, and you'll have seen me do them in loads of different ways on previous vehicle videos. So for this one, what I thought I would do is take you through the entire process. So not just the recipe and the steps that I've gone through, but also why I've gone through them, ones that I've considered and then discounted or discarded, and basically how we got to where we got to. So hopefully this can be useful to you and help inform the decisions you make when doing them on your own models. So let's paint. So the only thing I really knew for sure when it came to starting out with this was that I wanted to start off with a mixture of a metallic paint mixed with a non-metallic paint. I've chosen to use Iron Warriors here because I want something nice and thick and kind of sort of a dark-ish silver. And then I'm mixing in one of the mini colour paints. This is chocolate. I've done this in the past with not dissimilar colours, paints like Rhinox hide and stuff. So I was just keen to see how our mini colour paint would behave when I used it in the same way. And one of the reasons I wanted to use, say, Iron Warriors rather than something like Vallejo Metal Colour Series or stuff, which you might see me use often on metals, is I wanted to actually build up a little bit of physical texture here. So I'm stippled this mix on with a dry brush. And I want to create sort of texture as in painted texture on there, but I also want to create a little bit of physical texture on there. I don't mind that. I think it's quite nice. It gives that sort of suggestion that the tracks are made of something different, which I think is cool. And in the end, I did 2 coats of that to get that nice strong colour that you can see on the right-hand side there. And mixing flat colours into metallics is something I've done for a very long time, but whenever I mention it on classes, there's often somebody will go, oh, I didn't think you could do that, or I hadn't thought of doing that. So I'm not sure really why that's a thing, but it definitely is. As I say, it's on nearly every vehicle class I've done, someone will mention it. And you'll have seen in previous videos, I might mix in something like an ink or a contrast paint. And it won't just be for an application like this. If you want to alter the metallic colour that you've got, then by all means add in an ink or add in a flat paint like we've done here with the brown. Obviously, that paint will not only bring the colour difference to the mix, but it will also bring the properties of that paint to the mix. So that may be a good thing. That may be one of the reasons you want to do it, but also it may just be something you need to be sort of cautious of. So I know with this, by adding in that brown colour, I am going to dull the metal right down. But I know that's fine because I want my tracks to look like that sort of, cast pig iron type look. So that wasn't going to be an issue. If I was perhaps more bothered about not losing the shine and stuff, maybe I'd have gone for an ink or a contrast paint or something like that. Now, you may have noticed that I painted the tracks on the sprue. It's generally what I'll do if I have the chance to do it, particularly with these more modern GW kits. There's not actually that many pieces, and I just find it just saves me time really doing the sort of the donkey work part of it while it's still on the sprue. And also it allows me to, when I'm painting the tank itself, I'm not worrying about overspray or not thinking, oh God, I need to go back over that and sort that out before I can paint the tracks. So I say I paint the majority on the sprue, then I'll clip them off, I'll glue them on, and then I'll deal with any of the little bits like where the gates were and things like that. I'll touch that up with my brush when it's actually in situ. And then it's just a case of gluing them onto the model. Now I'm using super glue here because obviously a lot of the areas I am gluing it onto may already have a little bit of paint or something like that, so plastic glue might not always work. But from here on out, I didn't really know what to do. I had a few ideas and I thought, well, let's see what happens. Another reason that I like to leave the tracks off the model before I'm painting it is so I can play around really and see what I can do. And very often there will be parts of the tracks that you're not going to be able to see. So on this model, you can see here part 12, you actually have 6 of part 12. 2 of them are the bottom of each side, and then 1 of them is the forward sloping portion of each track. So I knew that I had 4 of these 12s that I could play with and do whatever I wanted with really. And if I don't want to, not even bother repainting them because you're not going to see them. They're just going to be glued on the bottom of the model. So that's what I went ahead and did. I did a load of them up in the that stippled thing and started out. So as I said, I wanted that kind of brownish cast sort of pig iron metal look to the tracks. It's a look I enjoy, but also, again, I like painting Warhammer stuff, and I like the Warhammer look. And for me, metallics is a very Warhammer look, whereas metallics on, say, scale models is something you don't see. Certainly, it's not so prevalent. And a lot of that's to do with simply how the model is painted. But one of the areas you do tend to see it on is the tracks. So I knew I wanted to give the tracks a little bit of either brown or purple hue to them. And the reason for that was simply that I thought it would be a really nice complement to the sort of white and the green that we have on the Death Guard model. This is why I say, like, there's so many ways of painting tracks. There's no right or wrong. And if I just had one recipe for doing tracks, that would be a little boring or problematic, in my opinion, because it would work great with certain schemes and then not so well with others. So I think it's definitely worth considering. Like I say, that's why I think it's a lot like basing. And you'll have people with basing who say you must do dark bases if it's a light model and vice versa. And then you'll have others like myself who prefer to base the model in the environment that I'm picturing them, fighting. That's how I like, so that sort of make-believe thing. That's how I enjoy doing my hobbies, is that self-immersion side of things. And then I'll have everyone, in between. But for me, I thought, right, I want that brown look. So I jumped into my oils and my enamels box. Now, you'll see me use oils very, very often. And enamels much less often. Largely that's because enamels really smell and they give me a bit of a headache, even though, I try my best with ventilation and all the rest of it. But I found this one, ignore the fact it says track wash on it. The reason I wanted it was because of the colour. It was this lovely sort of red-brown colour. So I applied it straight over the models in in a thick coat and then a more thinned down version, just to see what the difference would look like on the model. And I think they both look great. And there was this interesting little bit here where you can see the deposits that were left in the recesses on the thicker coat. That's something I wasn't looking for here. So this really was just meant to be a sort of filter over the tracks to change the colour a bit. But it's something I ended up coming back to and making a reason to use them. One thing I should have said earlier, and I've said in loads of other videos and clearly don't listen to myself, if you've used blue tack and you then use mineral spirits, it turns into this horrid gluey goop, which is just revolting. So just try and remember that. I did not. And that's why I've ended up with this. So I gave the one a sort of more or less undiluted coat and the other one a more diluted coat with mineral spirits. Now, enamel washes, treat them just like, for all intents and purposes, enamels are just oils and vice versa when it comes to how we use them and the products we use in our hobby. You can treat them both very, very similarly. One thing that enamels do offer you, though, is they come already as a wash consistency, and I find they do thin out better without splitting, which is something that can happen with oils if you thin them too far. They also, I think, have a slightly nicer, a finer finish. Can't quite think of the word, but many of them have that nice kind of dusty finish unless they've got something in them that makes them deliberately glossy or whatever. So the fact it was called track wash didn't matter. It could have been called cockpit brown or panel liner for German something or other or whatever. But the colour was the right colour. That was the main reason for choosing that. Then with regards to getting some sort of dust and muck and stuff in there, I simply grab the pigments that I typically use when I'm basing my models. This is the mix I use when I'm doing most of my sci-fi stuff, and certainly this is the mix I would be using if I was to do some Death Guard infantry in this scheme. So I've mixed them together dry, and then I tried a couple of different mixes out. So here I am thinning the pigments with mineral spirits as the carrier. This is something I do quite often. In fact, I would say I'll probably do it 50-50. I will thin it with mineral spirits like I'm thinning it here, and then other times I will thin it with airbrush thinner instead. There are pros and cons to both. The pros with the mineral spirits is that it's really, really easy to remove them where you don't want them, and they evaporate really quickly. So it's a quicker process to work with. The benefits of using the airbrush thinner to thin them with is that it acts as a much better fixative on the model. I would say if you want to see a bit more of the airbrush thinner style, I did that on quite a lot of my Adeptus Titanicus and Legions Imperialis stuff. So if you find those videos, you'll see me using it in there. But I just made the two mixes up and just popped them into the recesses just to see how it would go. So here you can see, again, I'm trying it out on the tank. I'm sort of looking at the bottom and comparing it to the paintwork and then comparing them against themselves. And I'd assumed this is what I was going to do, but actually I found that I liked that slight purple brown I had with the chocolate and Iron Warriors mix so much that I found once I put the track wash over it and then some of these powders, I found it almost went too red orange, or not too red orange, it lost too much of the purple. So here I was going, oh no, like, I know I have to do all of these processes, they're all individually, they're very simple, there's not that many of them. I need to do all these processes to add depth to the track so it doesn't just look like a silver and a wash, which I didn't want. I felt like the level of detail on the rest of the model, it needed a similar proportional look to the tracks. I didn't want it to look out of place, but I really hated the fact that I'd lost that colour. So I had to figure out how could I get some of the nice effects that I liked from that red brown, that I like the deposits in the recesses. I think it adds interest. It suggests that the tank is in the same environment as the infantry. But how can I do it without losing so much of the purple brown colour, the original sort of base colour? And this is where I guess the title of the video came from, was keep it simple, stupid. It's a bit of a cheesy phrase, isn't it? But actually it's not bad. So I went ahead and gave the tracks a wash using a thinned down wash of the enamel here. So just to reiterate, when using enamels and oils and stuff, we don't need to varnish the model or anything beforehand, provided that the acrylic paint underneath is properly dry, by which I mean, not just pop the hairdryer on it, but like, hairdryer on it and leave it for a bit. I think I left these overnight. Yeah, I did. I did these in the evening and then picked it up the following morning. It just gives you that little bit of certainty when using it, so you don't need to do varnishes or anything like that. So you can, by all means, and it means you can just crack on and work really quickly, but you will get the finish of that varnish, and if it's particularly glossy, then the enamels will behave differently. So there's lots of things to consider with that, and perhaps we'll deep dive those in future videos. But yeah, I'm just going to give the tracks a wash all over with the track wash, and you can see I'm sort of applying it neat and then just dipping my brush into mineral spirits and thinning it out on the model. If I was less lazy, I could have just made a thin down mix of it in addition and got on with it. I just want to say a huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. If it wasn't for you guys, we couldn't do what we do. So if you like what we do and are enjoying it, consider supporting us on there. You'll get extra videos most weeks as well from Andy, sort of masterclass display level stuff a lot of the time, and also some of our personal projects. And if for any reason you can't help us out on there, then consider hitting the like button, hitting subscribe, commenting, sharing, all those things that are more important now than they ever have been, with YouTube just being a bit weird. So yeah, I really appreciate all of that. Now back to this little deposit thing. I suddenly realised that the enamel wash gave me a not dissimilar effect in the recesses that the pigment wash did. And by removing some of the track wash, the enamel wash, from the flatter areas of the tracks, I would reveal more of the purpley brown base colour, whilst leaving that enamel wash in the recesses, giving me some of that dust and grime that I was looking for. So I was able here to effectively, well, certainly I could remove a product, and effectively I could remove a stage, which is brilliant when it comes to army painting. That's it's efficiency, isn't it? But also, I think any painting in general. So I had been using makeup sponges quite a lot recently, so a very, very dense, tight sponge when I've been doing a lot of scenery that you might have seen in some recent videos, and I've just dipped that into the mineral spirits. It sucks it right up, like it absorbs it like you wouldn't believe. Touched a little bit of the excess off, and then just gently, after I'd hair dried the wash, as you saw me there, so it's touch dry. Certainly it's not fully sort of cured on the model, but it's certainly touch dry. Just went on there and just gently working away at the tracks and just removing it from the flat areas. Gave me exactly what I wanted. So now let's look at some shiny stuff. We've got various ways of adding that metallic chipped edges or more sort of buffed, worn elements of the metal on the tracks. It's a look that you will see in military modelling and things like that, and it's just something I absolutely adore. I first saw this in the Imperial Armour Model Masterclass books. They used a bit of graphite around some chips and damage on some of the cupolas, and I thought that looks incredible. So you can get graphite powder, pigment powders, you can get the little graphite pencils like I saw there specifically for it, or you can just go out and buy one of these, a normal graphite art pencil, and all you're looking for is something like a 6B. A 6 is to do with how soft it is, and we want it nice and soft because we can just run this on the model itself and it will come off very easily, or we can scrape it off like this and create a powder. And the B is to do with how dark it is, so it's black value. So a 6B, something like that, will be absolutely brilliant. And I always bring packs of these to classes and stuff just to hand out because they're just a super useful little bit of kit to have. And the reason I like it is because the 6B, again, the blackness here is, as the name suggests, it's quite dark, which is nice. So it gives me that sort of dull, rubbed off, sort of revealed metal look, not like a shiny, fresh chip. And again, it's all about, in my opinion, it's about sort of layering up little details like this to add a bit of interest to the model. So you can use, like what I'm doing here, like a little makeup brush to apply it with. You could use a clay shaper. I've used that in the past to apply it to the model. So we're just dipping that in the sort of powdered graphite that we've created there. Generally, though, I just use my finger. That was how I first saw it used. That was how I did it for ages, so that's why I'm very comfortable. Using this as a product. I'm not saying it's the best way; it's just the way I do it. Yeah, it's great. Certain nooks and crannies you can't get into, so you need to use another tool or something. But for most of it, you can just use your finger. And as hopefully you can see here as well, what I mean by that slightly darker, slightly more dull metallic finish. I couldn't get this with a metallic, like an acrylic paint. You just wouldn't get that fineness. All the subtlety, I don't think, anyway. Let's put it this way, I couldn't do it with a metallic acrylic paint. So I'm going to do the sort of links, whatever they are, the hinges, something like that, between that, and then I'm going to do the edges of the tracks as well. And as you can see, I just sort of stick my finger in the thing, rub it between my finger and thumb, and just wipe it down the model. There's nothing to it really other than that. And again, the enamel's just touch dry. I haven't left it to cure for hours and hours and hours. It's just, it's sat there while I had lunch, and then I've gone on and worked on it, but it's definitely dry. I can do this without any worry. And hopefully you can see the difference there between the track as we're looking on the right and the track on the left. A simple technique, but I think it's really given it some interest now. I was getting proper excited at this point with the project. So now I'm going to go and grab the dark steel, which is a brighter silver color, and I'm just going to apply this to some of the edges where I feel like there would be fresher damage occurring, so there's less sort of accumulated grime and more sort of freshly revealed metal. So here I'm just, and I've made sure I've used a different finger as well to do it with, but you can see here I'm just focusing more on the very sort of edges. And it might not seem like much difference. Certainly you can see it in the hand, a significant difference between the two. But I think, again, just because the techniques are simple, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't layer them up on each other. You shouldn't still try and have some variation in there between the silvers. Of course, I could have just used the brighter silver and just gone all over them and been done with it. But took an additional 5 minutes or so to do that, maybe 10 minutes. It's nothing, and I genuinely think it adds value sort of doing it in that way. And then any areas, as I say, I can't get sort of accurate enough with my finger, you just use something else. So here I just used a cotton bud because it was to hand. I say I could have used the eraser on the back of the pencil that I got the graphite off. That probably would have worked quite well, that little rubber. I say all clay shaper tools, things like that. It's just to catch a few more edges. And again, because I want it to look like some care has gone into this and some thought, it's not just a product and a technique. I'm trying to make the thing look like a shrunk down, a scaled down tank. Not super realistic, but I want it to make sense in that capacity. And if for another reason I quite like using the pigments, or the graphite rather, for doing this with is, if you do make a mistake, it's fairly easy. You can just grab a soft brush and dust it away. Whereas if I'd done that with a metallic paint, it would be trickier for sure. And there we go. And that's easier to get in here, in between the links as well, just to get those little pins. Because again, I think that would have looked a little incongruous, them just being completely rusted with no chips or anything on them. Just because and the only reason that would be is because I couldn't get my finger in there. So again, I want it to make sense against itself as we're as we're looking at it. Do though be careful and wash your hands after you do all this, because otherwise you'll cover everything in silver. And that's the track's complete. That's all I want to do with it. With regards to durability and gaming and things like that, will some of that powder rub off? Yeah, possibly, probably. I don't know. I don't game that often with them. But if it does, I just reapply it. It takes 5 minutes. So that's not a concern for me. I think the look is worth it. I love it. I absolutely love it. So this is what I would do for my gaming minis as well as display minis. So I hope that has been a useful little video. I appreciate it's possibly thinking, Henry, that was like 4 stages. Why is it taking you 20 minutes or whatever to show me or explain it? But I want this series to be a really useful little repository for us to refer back to as we go on over the years with various projects, and perhaps people who are coming into the hobby new, as it's a jumping off point for them to go and explore some of these techniques a little bit further. I'm sure loads of you, as there are in the Discord, in the Super Heavy Challenge, there are loads of you using many more techniques, some more advanced, and that's awesome. I want to encourage that, but I'm deliberately in this series doing what I consider to be the sort of fundamentals, skills and products. I don't just want to throw a million products and techniques at this model. I want to show what can be done with sort of just simple techniques and forethought. So yeah, I hope that was useful. There's a lovely phrase I read the other day to do with something like failure can be full of valuable information. And these tracks aren't a failure by any means, but it could have been frustrating when I was following a process that I thought I knew would work, but it didn't look right on this model. And out of that, I have discovered something else, which is awesome, which is using that track wash as a deposit rather than using it as a filter, which I initially thought of. Obviously, it still has filtered it slightly, but you know what I'm getting at. So as ever, if you've any questions about anything I've done at all, pop them down in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If any of you fancy joining in with this Super Heavy Challenge, you've got a vehicle, a tank you want to paint up, jump on in the Discord. Submission's going to be the end of the month, and we'll do a nice video looking at how everybody's been getting on. A few people getting finished already, which is awesome, and then loads of others saying they're going to be getting a bunch done over the Christmas break. Thank you so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you like any of the models that you've seen in this video, but you don't have the time or the wherewithal to do them yourselves, then consider giving Ben an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com. Maybe he can help you out.